because when I started applying, even in the academic world, which I felt most comfortable, I thought I could be a dean or maybe, administrative staff at a higher level. And I was having a hard time convincing hiring managers, I guess, that, maybe I had only 6 or 9 years of teaching experience, but I spent 23 years in the military. That problem solving, that leadership can translate to, helping the university that I was going to work at. It's very hard to see that in a resume, I think, sometimes.
Welcome to Knowing Me, Knowing You, the podcast for the future of wealth management. Thanks for being here. I'm Marla Sofer. Money is a tool. It empowers people. Let's dive into how technology is personalizing advice, strengthening connections, and creating lasting impact. If you're an advisor looking to differentiate, a fintech leader shaping the next wave, or a client ready to take control of your financial future, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hi, and today we are joined by Richard Comitz, a West Point graduate, Army veteran, educator, and now a fierce advocate for those transitioning out of military life into civilian careers and entrepreneurship. After serving for 23 years in the U.S. Army, including teaching chemistry at West Point, Richard found the shift into higher ed and civilian roles more challenging than expected, especially when it came to transitioning military value into professional worth. Now, as a leader at American Corporate Partners, or ACP, somewhere where I have been a mentor for many years and very much appreciate everything that they do to help veterans come into the workforce and succeed in the workforce, Richard is championing programs that help other veterans navigate those same transitions. From corporate mentorships to launching entrepreneurial platforms like ACP Village, Richard is helping veterans move forward with clarity, confidence, and community. We're going to talk about the future of work, what employers can learn from veteran talent, the power of small and medium-sized business ownership, and why building purpose after service may just be the next great wealth opportunity. Rich, welcome to the Knowing Me, Knowing You podcast.
Thanks for having me, Marla.
It's a delight for you to be here. I am such a huge fan, as I was saying, of ACP. I think the work you do is so important. You are helping veterans, I think, themselves understand their own value and what they bring into the private space. So we always start with this question, and I would love your angle on it, which is what excites you about the moment we're in right now as it relates to how you see the future and how you see veterans really finding their place in the future?
Yeah, I think you could look at the current situation in the world and look at it from many different angles. I like to be positive, right? So I think this is an opportunity for people to start looking forward and seeing what the possibilities are. With the veterans and spouses that we help, doesn't really matter what's going on in the rest of the world. They're kind of in their own world of like all the stress and anxiety of what am I going to do after I get out of the military? And so, what's exciting is we get to help a lot of those people and make that transition. And by having volunteers like you work with them, it really relieves that stress and anxiety, and it helps them get, I'd argue, a better job in a better place where they really enjoy themselves. They kind of find that purpose and mission after the military, more so than they might have if they didn't have a mentorship through our program. So I'm excited about the opportunity to help more people. There's some people that'll be transitioning away from government service in the next few months, voluntarily or involuntarily, and they can look at that as a bad opportunity, but I'm excited to be able to help them find their next opportunity.
So just out of curiosity, does ACP only look at the military, or do you also look at people that are coming out of other government service as you're helping them with mentorship?
So no, we only work with veterans and military spouses. And so, but what we find is that, I'm sure you've heard, and they're estimating somewhere around 200,000 government servants are probably going to be relocated or laid off in the next, this year. And it turns out that a lot of veterans leave military service and then go into government service. And so the proportion is high, something like 40%. So I've seen estimates of 84,000 of those 200,000 people will probably be veterans. And so we're looking to that as an opportunity to help them, those people that are going to be transitioning from government service. Even though they might have already gotten out of the military, we still help anyone that has served since 9/11. So if they served 10 years ago, been in the government service for a few years, and now they find themselves unemployed, we're happy to help them.
That makes sense. And it doesn't matter if they're kind of fresh out of the military. They could have gone into the private sector and lost their job, or gone into the government sector and lost their job. You're going to keep helping them as they're looking at their next step, as long as they are a veteran since 9/11, 2001.
That's right.
When we had a conversation and met the first time, you were very candid about your own career pivot and how after the military, you kind of found your way into academia. You were a teacher, you worked at a college. Talk a little bit about your transition. What were some of the challenges that you felt like you had to overcome, and how that brought you to where you are now at ACP?
Yeah, I think the most challenging thing for me was, one, kind of being willing to step out of the comfort zone and figure out what I can do and what I wanted to do. I went into higher ed, honestly, because it was an easy transition. I was my last assignment, I was teaching at West Point. So I was already in higher ed. So going into higher ed made the most sense to me. I was kind of scared to see where else in corporate America I might be able to fit in, because I had a unique kind of background, and not unlike anybody else in the military. But if you look at me specifically, I had degrees in chemistry. I spent time in the military at different leadership levels, but also doing different things. So things that aren't necessarily translatable to the civilian world. So even though I spent 23 years in the military, I really wasn't sure what that would do for me. And that was also a problem when I was applying for jobs, because when I started applying, even in the academic world, which I felt most comfortable, I thought I could be a dean or maybe, administrative staff at a higher level. And I was having a hard time convincing hiring managers, I guess, that, maybe I had only 6 or 9 years of teaching experience, but I spent 23 years in the military. That problem solving, that leadership can translate to, helping the university that I was going to work at. It's very hard to see that in a resume, I think, sometimes. Or I think sometimes hiring managers look at the easy, we ask for these 5 things experience-wise, and this person hasn't. And if you look at my resume, you can infer I have those, but there's no clear-cut bullets that address some things. And so it's difficult sometimes to fit someone that's not, that hasn't done the traditional route into a higher level job without taking that chance, or at least having the conversation.
There is so much vulnerability and truth and I think courage in how you just shared your story, because what I heard you saying is, look, I had to figure out what I'm good at and what I can do based off of what I've done and what I know I'm good at. And you said the word, I'll just kind of repeat it back. You said you're scared to look in corporate America because you have a unique background. And there, not only did you experience that, but when you actually tried and went into the private sector, they had a hard time seeing that overlap and the resonance of your leadership and problem solving in their context. One of the things that I experienced with the veterans that I mentored through ACP is that applicability in the how to position myself for this different world. And I think in the military, you have such a different culture. You've got utter honesty and integrity. And I feel like there is this integrity, honesty, hierarchy, all those things that come with kind of military service. And in the corporate world, you have a whole bunch of people, you got a whole bunch of bullshitters who are doing a really good job kind of climbing up ladders and telling a good story. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they have the skill or have ever evidenced that skill in their past. Whereas you have quite the opposite problem. You've evidenced it time and time and time again in the most challenging settings. It doesn't really get much more challenging in terms of setting than in the military. And really kind of telling that story effectively is a big part of how ACP supports veterans. So I want to call out a couple of things. One is, listening to this podcast are generally people in wealth management, people in fintech, people looking at the future of money. And you talked about the value of a unique background. And I know I've spoken to a lot of people in our industry who are interested in hiring veterans. They do value the culture of service and service at the highest level that military veterans contribute to their work and their ethics. Tell us a little bit about ACP, how it's evolved, how the model is unique to help the corporate world find the veterans and kind of help the veterans really sink in and tell their story in that strong, strong way with potential employees or people who might hire them or work with them as a vendor, as an entrepreneur building their business?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of mentors in our program, and they come from a lot of different places, right? We have corporate partnerships where the corporations are supporting us financially, but then also offering this opportunity to their employees to be mentors. And then we have a bunch of people that have come across us, whether it be from a prior job or from a friend, or somehow they found out about us, they volunteered to mentor, and we're so happy that they are. So having that wide variety of mentors is helpful, not only for our proteges, but also within the companies, right? Because when you start working with veterans, oftentimes, and spouses, you're almost like, wow, this guy or girl is awesome. We need to hire them, or we need someone like this on our team. And so that kind of educates people to, especially those that haven't had much exposure to the military. You know, if you watch movies, or you have certain stereotypes in your head based off of whatever, you might think that military people are just yelling at people, or that they all have, post-traumatic stress, all these other, maybe stereotypes that you've seen in movies and all that stuff. But I think the good qualities are, things that you mentioned, but, that kind of loyalty, that attention to detail, that discipline, that, wanting to get the mission accomplished, and being creative to solve those problems, to solve get to the mission. And so those things are really good. And I think that the companies recognize that, and it helps translate to their wanting to hire veterans a lot more than if they didn't. So our model is not just, donate to a good cause, but also get yourself or your employees involved in the process, which I think helps a lot of companies kind of bond internally as well, where they have this organization to rally behind and to support. And then, they're talking about it, they're helping each other out. And it really does kind of help build the company, as well as, the good work they're doing to mentor the proteges. So, and then the other thing that we're a little bit different is we pair the mentor and the protege up for a long period of time. So we ask that they meet once a month, at least for an hour, and people do that differently, and maybe it's more, but that's the minimum. And we follow them up to a year. And so you really get the opportunity to know someone, really get that rapport. You might have to break down some walls in the beginning, but you build that trust, and you really form a good relationship. And the veteran or spouse has a cheerleader, a mentor, someone that's, disinterested party that is willing to, give them the truth that they might need to hear sometimes, which is super helpful. And, as we're tracking through the year, you get to go through that whole process rather than just like, oh, here's, a half hour worth of tips and then good luck. And so it works for both the mentor, because they get to see that through, but the proteges get that kind of that partner through their journey as well.
So I got a question for you. And I've worked much of my career in money and wealth management, investment management, and our entire industry is financial services. The intent behind that, and there's plenty of, front page news where there have been conflicts of interest and we get this wrong sometimes. And, obviously regulators jump in, but at its core, the idea is to provide financial services to another person to help them live a better life. And I've worked with multiple veterans in different roles I've had. Have you seen that financial services, or even wealth management, and helping people make better financial choices is a path that veterans might be interested in exploring, and that is kind of well suited to their culture of service?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you at the end there, you said culture of service. I was going to say most veterans at their core want to help somebody out. And it may be counterintuitive thinking that, they're carrying weapons and things like that. But really the reason why they're joining, the reason why they're doing these things is to help someone else out, maybe the weaker person, or to protect someone or whatever else. And so that's different in the civilian world, right? But when you're doing something like teaching, something like advising, mentoring someone, talking to them about something they don't know financially, guiding them through that, I think that veterans will, really resonate with that pretty well, because that idea, you're always teaching someone in the military, right? When you get in the military, you're the lowest on the totem pole. someone's teaching you how to do things. But then, 6 months later, you're not the lowest one on the totem pole and you're teaching that next person. And as you go up in the military, you're always teaching someone. You're always trying to give someone tips and kind of how to navigate the next steps of their career and their life. And so I think that's very similar to, financial services. So you are really doing the same type of thing. The people that do it well can really relate to the people where they're at and help them get where they want to go.
What if financial planning wasn't just about numbers, but about you, your values, your goals, your vision for the future? Nomi is transforming client discovery for wealth managers, going beyond assets and risk scores to uncover what truly matters. With behavioral insights and real-time data, Nomi helps advisors personalize advice, build deeper connections, and grow their businesses. Because the best financial decisions start with knowing you. Discover the future of client engagement at nomi.com. Yeah, some of the best financial managers that I've met in my life view themselves as teachers, in fact, and they view that their role is to help people build confidence in their relationship with money and to help them worry less about money. And so I love that parallel and how you talked about that. You launched within ACP an entrepreneurial track for veteran entrepreneurs. What kind of sparked that? What are you seeing in terms of veteran interest in owning and building small business? And what would you like, this industry, the financial industry, to know in order to support those veterans in a way that will help them build viable businesses, however that shapes out?
Yeah, I'll tell you that we're always looking to improve, here at ACP, and we always are asking our proteges when they come in kind of to list the top 3 to 5 things that they're interested in doing. We kind of have about 15 choices based off industry or area. And, when we started doing the math, we realized that it was somewhere between 20 and 25% of people are putting in their top 3, entrepreneurship or owning a small business or working for myself. And so as we saw that 1 year and then 2 years, and we saw that a year after year, we're like, well, what can we do to help that population? We did that with the spouse program. We started a spouse program where we saw that they needed a special program, women veterans, and so this was kind of the next evolution. And a lot of people don't want to work for someone else; they want to work for themselves. But when you're leaving the military, you may not have any idea what that entails. And so what we aim to do with our program is not, replicate or replace anything that's already out there, because there are some great programs that kind of cohort-based walk you through. We wanted to have kind of this evergreen space where someone could go in at any time, ask questions, get answers, find resources wherever they're at in their journey, and have that access all the time. And of course, because of our base program, we're going to give them a mentor, and that mentor is going to be able to help them wherever they're at in their journey. So maybe they need a small business mentor. Maybe they need a marketing mentor. Maybe they need a finance mentor, right? So depending on where they're at in their journey, the mentor will try to pick a mentor that will help them where they're at in that journey, and having resources for them to look at it anytime they want, whenever they want, or a platform to ask questions and get kind of crowdsource some answers is super helpful for proteges as they're going through the entrepreneurial journey, because oftentimes you don't know what you don't know in the beginning. And so asking some questions definitely helps in that way. So we saw the need, and we tried to fill it with this kind of special offshoot of our program.
What a fantastic concept that can be replicated into wealth management. I love that it's not an accelerator that's one time done, static. It's evergreen. You get a mentor, they help you out. One of the things that I think challenges wealth management the most is new advisor failure rates. So 3 years into trying to launch a new advisory business, over 70% of new advisors fail. And so I think it's fantastic that you've created kind of a great cushion to help aspiring entrepreneurs succeed, regardless of what industry or market they're going into. You shared with me that your wife is about to open or has opened a bookstore. What has kind of that entrepreneurial journey in your personal life taught you about the realities and the risk and the heartache of entrepreneurship?
Yeah. So I mean, first of all, when we started this process, I started going into our resources at ACP to try to figure out how, I could use the village to help. We're not there. We're not open yet, hopefully this summer, but this is something my wife really wanted to do, and tried to encourage her to, take that next leap and be supportive. But we really didn't know what we were getting ourselves into, or as far as all the details that it took. And so one thing I learned is you have to be patient. Things take a lot longer than you think they're going to take oftentimes, especially when you're dealing with lawyers and landlords and all that type of stuff, and vendors.
And I can echo that. That is true in the world of digital as well. It's not just with, like, the lawyers are the same, but the landlords and everything else, you just have, everything takes longer than expected.
Whether it be physical space or just like, I need to talk to this person about a program or addition to my app or whatever the case may be. But right, so that patience is important. But then also, I think one thing that we've been very fortunate about, but if you don't do it, you could take the long way, is seeking out advice from mentors. If you're talking to, you need a lawyer, or you're talking about documents that have legal implications, talk to a lawyer. The other thing that my wife and I did was a lot of research. My wife particularly. When I say my wife and I, this is all my wife's thing. I'm just a supporter of this. But we spent weekends going to all over the place, checking out all the bookstores, checking out the Vibe, checking out what activities they have going on. What do they look like? What is it? What do we think is working? What do we think is not working? And so we did a lot of that research as well. So I think research is important. I think patience is important. I think seeking, advice, mentors or experts, if you will. Those are the things that I've learned. And I guess finally, business is a lot more complicated than maybe it should be or needs to be, but it's very, very complicated. So there's a lot of things to consider, to think about, a lot of details. And when you're the maybe sole person, or there's not a lot of people involved, that means that you have to think of everything or address everything.
Yeah, it requires, I think, also tenacity. You've got like the patience, research, mentors, but if you don't really want it and you're not willing to go through the ups and downs, you got to really want it, and you got to be in for that.
As you were saying that, I was like, not just patience, but resilience, I think, is probably another way to put it too.
Let's come back to the topic of money for a moment. So you shared and you talked about your kids and kind of their expectations. You shared with me as we were preparing here that you've got a stepchild who's kind of coming out of college this week, right? Next week. And kids today expect immediately to land 6-figure jobs, buy their first homes. So they have these very high financial expectations. So you're a parent, you're a mentor, you run a program of mentors. What do you think Gen Z and our next generation that are kind of the next era that is looking at money to help them live a meaningful life? What do they need to hear about planning for a meaningful life, whether or not that is kind of in line with their financial ideals and what they're expecting, or maybe not?
Yeah, I mean, and I work with we have about 80 people on staff, and I'd say I'm one of the oldest people here. So most of them, it's their first job out of college, or maybe second job. And so, yeah, I mean, one of the things in being a nonprofit, we're not paying the 6-figure job. But I think one of the things I think is probably the hardest thing for young people nowadays is, I think a lot of them know that they need to work hard, but what does that look like in kind of their work-life balance, if there is a balance? And then the idea of instant gratification that our society has kind of put on people, as well as the fact that you can see everything on social media and all, makes it difficult. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge. But I encourage people to figure out, like, as you're getting your first job or you're in the position, put some money away each month, no matter what. If it has to start with $25, then put $25, but continue to get in that practice. And then maybe when you're getting raises and whatever, you bump that up, but get into some sort of habit of putting money away, because it's very easy in this day and age to spend everything you get as soon as you get it. And there's always something more that you want, or something new that you can get. Having that honest conversation with yourself, do I really need that? And I think people say pay yourself first, but save some money. No matter where you're at in life, start putting some money away to start saving in that way, I think is probably the most important thing, because most people are used to buying things on credit and really just trying to keep up with everybody else.
Sage wisdom there. In your own personal life, and this may be the advice, but what has been kind of your enlightened moment where it changed your personal relationship with money? Was it a conversation, an incident, something that changed the way that you personally interact with money?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's when you start getting to the point where other people are dependent on you, right? And so when you're having a kid or when you have to make a big purchase like a house or something like that, but I think having other people depend on you when you get married or you're having children, when you start having that dependency, now you have to kind of really pay attention to maybe delaying that personal gratification, or do we really need that? And, maybe the answer is not now, but maybe it's later, let's save for it or whatever. But what I find really, I don't know what the right word is, sounding troubling, worrisome, is that, with the way housing prices are, it's very hard to afford. Back in the day, maybe 50 years ago, when the American dream was graduate from college, get married, buy a house, and, you live happily ever after. That equation's changed a little bit because it's not really tangible to, graduate from college and buy a house right away. But, you have to find a way to put yourself on a path to achieve what you want to do. And that starts with saving, I think. So.
And I like that you kind of shared, and I think it's true for so many, that the level of urgency shifts when you are responsible. When you're responsible for someone else's life and livelihood,
Yes.
The level of urgency, the heat goes up. And you gotta make sure that your behaviors accommodate for the responsibility that's now on your plate.
Yeah, and something probably silly to think about, but it's the idea of when someone goes from having a sports car to a minivan, right? or something like that, right? Well, maybe I don't need that sports car anymore. And maybe you don't have to have a minivan, but you know what I'm saying? That sports car is because you have all the time and money and you want to please yourself, but now you have to think about the family and maybe it's not practical to have a sports car.
That is fantastic. I think that's definitely the words of wisdom as it relates to kind of what are the money advice pieces that you want to express out, just given your experience and what you see with veterans. Rich, thank you so much for sharing your journey from the discipline of military service to being a teacher to creating this and spearheading ACP, which is just full of people who want to do more for the world. They want to use their commitment to service and translate that into the corporate world or into being an entrepreneur in some meaningful way. I think your story is a powerful reminder that leadership is definitely transferable and that the purpose doesn't ever end. It evolves. You're kind of just how you continue to show up in that culture of service shifts as you go through life and in different settings. Where can our listeners find out more if they want to become a mentor, if they want to become a corporate sponsor, if they want to figure out, hey, how can I hire somebody that's right now a protege at ACP?
Yeah, I think the best way is they can go to our website. Our website's acp-usa.org. They can start there. If they have a specific question, they can reach out to, we have an information box, info@acp-usa.org. Follow us on LinkedIn. We have a really good following there and we put out a lot of good information and have ways to get communicated.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Speaking as a former and current mentor, it has been incredibly rewarding. Just working with the ACP proteges and helping them through their transitions is really kind of helping, each one is changing someone's world in a meaningful way. If you're in a moment of transition, listeners, or if you're helping someone through a moment of transition, take a look, go to the website that Rich just mentioned, figure out how you're defining value, how you are contributing value into your current professional setting, and how you recognize the skills, experience, and stories that might not fit the standard mold, but they bring an unmatched perspective into the work that you're doing now. If this conversation was valuable to you, if you want to share it with maybe a person who is a veteran in your life or somebody who might want to hire, mentor, or contribute to ACP in a meaningful way, share this podcast with them. Let us know in the comments if this was meaningful. And thank you so much again, Rich, for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us on the Knowing Me, Knowing You podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Your support helps us bring more transformative conversations to you. Until next time, keep discovering, keep growing, and remember, you're in control of your own financial story. Follow us for more conversations on financial confidence, self-discovery, and the future of money.